Have you ever wondered how one single skill can completely transform your future? What if I told you that learning English could open doors you never imagined? It could take you from a small town to the biggest opportunities in the world. It could help you study abroad, build a successful career, meet amazing people, and achieve dreams that once seemed impossible. Today, I want to share an unforgettable story. This isn't just about learning a language. It's about courage, sacrifice, determination, and the power of believing in yourself. If your dream is to become a doctor, engineer, lawyer, entrepreneur, pilot, or any successful professional, then English is no longer optional. It's essential. It is the language of education, technology, business, science, and international communication. More than 1 billion people use English every single day. The world's best universities teach in English. Most research papers are published in English. International companies hire people who can communicate confidently in English. The good news? You don't have to be born in an English-speaking country to become fluent. If someone like me could do it, you can too. My name is Sophia. I was born in a peaceful town in Brazil. My family wasn't wealthy, but we were thankful for everything we had. We lived a simple life filled with love, respect, and hope. My father worked long hours as a taxi driver. Every evening he returned home exhausted, but he always smiled before opening the front door. My mother was a school teacher. She believed that education could change any person's destiny. Since childhood, my parents repeated the same sentence again and again. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. Those words became part of my life. As a little girl, I had only one dream. I wanted to become a doctor. People often asked me why. The answer was hidden inside one unforgettable day. I was only 10 years old when my younger brother became seriously ill. His fever was extremely high, and my parents rushed him to the nearest hospital. I can still remember sitting outside the emergency room. My mother was crying. My father kept walking back and forth, unable to hide his fear. Had never seen my parents so helpless before. Then a doctor entered the room. He looked calm. He spoke with confidence. His face carried kindness instead of panic. He gently examined my brother, asked a few questions, and immediately started the treatment. Watching him work was like watching someone perform a miracle. Within a few hours, my brother's condition became stable. The fever started going down. My parents finally smiled again. At that exact moment, I made a promise to myself. One day, I will become a doctor and help families the same way this doctor helped mine. For years, that dream motivated me. I studied hard. I respected my teachers. I believed everything was possible, but as I grew older, reality hit me harder than I expected. I discovered something that completely changed my perspective. Almost every medical textbook was written in English. The latest medical research, English international conferences, English medical entrance exams, mostly English. Even the best online courses for future doctors were available in English. Suddenly, my biggest dream depended on one skill I barely had. Unfortunately, my English was terrible. I attended a public school where English classes were very basic. We memorized small vocabulary lists. We learned simple greetings, but nobody taught us how to actually communicate. Whenever I saw a long English paragraph, I felt completely lost. The words looked confusing. The grammar seemed impossible. Pronunciation terrified me. One afternoon, during English class, my teacher asked me to read a paragraph from the textbook. I stood up slowly. Every student looked at me. I stared at the page, hoping the words would somehow become easier, but they didn't. Couldn't pronounce the first sentence correctly. I stopped halfway. The classroom became silent. Then someone laughed. A few more students joined in. My face turned red. I wished I could disappear. Softly, I looked at my teacher and whispered, "I'm sorry, I can't read it." That day was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. After school, I locked myself inside my room. I kept asking myself the same painful question. How can I become a doctor if I can't even read a simple English paragraph? For the first time, my dream felt impossible. Days passed, I became quieter. I stopped talking about becoming a doctor. My parents noticed the change immediately. One evening, after returning from work, my father sat beside me. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked, "Sophia, what's happening? You've lost your smile." I couldn't hold my emotions anymore. I told him everything. I told him how embarrassed I felt, how scared I was, how English seemed like a wall standing between me and my future. After listening carefully, my father remained silent for a few seconds. Then he said something that changed my life forever. If English is standing between you and your dream, then don't run away from it. Learn it. I sighed. But where? We don't have enough money. He smiled gently. We may not be rich, but we are rich enough to invest in your future." His words shocked me. That night, our family sat around the dinner table discussing possibilities. We searched for countries where I could improve my English while continuing my education. Many options were too expensive. Some were too far away. Others didn't fit our budget. Finally, one country caught our attention, Canada. It seemed like the perfect choice. English was spoken everywhere. The education system was respected around the world. The country welcomed international students from every background. Most importantly, compared to several other destinations, studying there was still possible for families like ours. But even then, the cost was enormous for us. My parents looked at each other. They knew the sacrifices ahead would not be easy. Still, without hesitation, they made their decision. They chose my future over their comfort. And at that moment, I realized something priceless. Sometimes the biggest dreams are built on the biggest sacrifices. A few months later, everything happened faster than I had imagined. Parents sold things they had spent years buying. My father worked extra shifts every weekend. My mother used almost all of her savings. They never complained. Instead, they kept telling me, "This is not an expense. It's an investment in your future." The night before my flight, my mother packed my suitcase carefully. She folded every piece of clothing as if she were packing her love inside it. Before closing the suitcase, she slipped a small family photo into one of the pockets. She smiled and said, "Whenever you feel alone, look at this picture and remember why you started." I couldn't stop crying. The next morning, I hugged both of my parents tighter than ever before. Deep inside, I knew my life was about to change forever. A few hours later, I boarded the plane to Canada. As the airplane took off, I looked through the window. My hometown slowly disappeared beneath the clouds. I whispered to myself, "This is the beginning of something extraordinary." After many hours of flying, I finally landed in Toronto. Everything felt different. The airport was huge. People were walking quickly in every direction. Announcements echoed through the building in fast English. I tried my best to understand them, but every sentence sounded like one long word. Then came my first real challenge. An airport employee smiled at me and asked, "How's it going?" I froze. I knew the words separately, but together. I had absolutely no idea what he meant. I simply smiled awkwardly and answered, "Yes." He looked confused. I looked embarrassed. That was my very first conversation in Canada, and it lasted only 2 seconds. Outside the airport, cold air hit my face like ice. Back home, winter was nothing like this. My hands became numb within minutes. I pulled my jacket tighter and thought, how do people actually live in this weather? Everything felt unfamiliar. The streets, the buildings, the food, even the silence felt different. Later that evening, I reached the small room I had rented. It wasn't luxurious, just a tiny bedroom with a single bed, a small desk, and one window overlooking a busy street. I placed my suitcase on the floor and sat quietly. For the first time in my life, I was thousands of miles away from everyone I loved. That night, loneliness hit me harder than anything else. I missed my parents. I missed my brother. I even missed the simple sounds of my neighborhood. For a moment, I questioned my decision. Did I make a mistake? The next morning, I walked to my English language school. Students from many different countries filled the classrooms. Some were from Japan. Others came from Korea, Mexico, Turkey, Italy, and Colombia. Everyone had the same goal, to master English. Our teacher welcomed us warmly. She introduced herself with a big smile. Then she said, "Today we'll start by introducing ourselves." One by one, students stood up confidently. When my turn arrived, my heart started racing. I stood slowly. Every pair of eyes was looking at me. I tried to speak. "Hello, my name is Sophia. I'm from Brazil. I want learn English." Suddenly my mind went blank. I couldn't remember another single word. The classroom became silent. A few students smiled politely. Others tried not to laugh. I sat down feeling completely defeated. After class, I walked home with tears in my eyes. I kept replaying that embarrassing moment over and over. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe English is simply too difficult for me. But something inside me refused to quit. That evening, instead of crying again, I opened a notebook. On the first page, I wrote one sentence in big letters. "I will speak English confidently." Then I made a promise to myself. Every single day, I would improve. Even if it was only one small step. I created my own daily routine. Wake up early. Study vocabulary. Practice listening. Read simple stories. Speak out loud. Review grammar. Repeat. Every single day, I stopped worrying about being perfect. Instead, I focused on becoming better than yesterday. During my first week, I noticed many surprising things about Canadian life. Students dressed however they wanted. Nobody wore school uniforms. People waited patiently in lines. Drivers stopped immediately for pedestrians. Strangers smiled at each other. Everyone seemed to say sorry, even when nothing was wrong. At supermarkets, many customers scanned and paid for their own groceries. It felt like living in another world, but the biggest surprise was everyday English. Back in Brazil, I had learned textbook English. In Canada, people spoke completely differently. Instead of saying, "Do you want to drink coffee?" they simply said, "Want to grab a coffee?" Instead of, "I agree with you," they often said, "I'm totally in." Sometimes conversations finished before I even understood the first sentence. At first, this frustrated me. I wondered if all my previous English lessons had been useless. Then one teacher gave me advice I will never forget. She said, "Don't try to understand every word. Understand the message." Those few words completely changed my learning strategy. From that day forward, I stopped translating every sentence into Portuguese. Instead, I trained myself to listen for meaning. Little by little, English stopped looking like a puzzle. It slowly became a language. And for the first time since arriving in Canada, I finally believed that fluency was possible. From that day on, I stopped waiting for confidence to magically appear. I decided to build it myself. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise. While most people were still sleeping, I was already reviewing vocabulary and listening to English podcasts. At first, I understood almost nothing. The speakers talked so quickly that every sentence sounded impossible. But instead of giving up, I kept listening again and again and again. One of my teachers once told me, "Your ears must learn English before your mouth can speak it." That advice stayed with me, so I surrounded myself with English everywhere. My phone changed to English. My laptop changed to English. My social media feeds became English. Even my music playlists were filled with English songs. At first it felt uncomfortable. Every notification became a small lesson. Every advertisement taught me a new word. Slowly, English stopped being a school subject. It became part of my everyday life. Still, speaking remained my biggest fear. Whenever I wanted to say something, my brain became crowded with questions. Is this grammar correct? What if my pronunciation is wrong? What if everyone laughs at me? Those thoughts were my biggest enemy. One afternoon, while walking through downtown Toronto, I came up with an unusual idea. I put on my headphones. People would think I was talking on the phone. But in reality, I was talking to myself. I looked around and described everything I could see. The sky is cloudy. Today, a woman is walking her dog. The coffee shop is busy. That man is riding a bicycle. At first, I felt ridiculous, but after a few days, something changed. I wasn't translating anymore. Words started coming naturally. Every walk became a speaking lesson. Nobody stared at me. Nobody judged me. Everyone assumed I was simply having a phone conversation. It became my secret practice. Method. Another habit completely transformed my vocabulary. Instead of trying to memorize 50 words every day, I learned only 3. Just 3. But I used them repeatedly. I wrote them. I spoke them. I created sentences with them. Before sleeping, I reviewed them again. 3 words every day became 21. Every week, more than 90 every month. By the end of a year, I had learned over 1,000 useful words without feeling overwhelmed. That simple strategy worked far better than cramming endless vocabulary lists. Listening practice also became much smarter. In the beginning, I watched movies with subtitles in Portuguese. Then I switched to English subtitles. Finally, I removed subtitles completely. The first few days were painful. I understood very little, but instead of stopping the movie every minute, I focused on understanding the main idea. Little by little, my ears adjusted. Expressions that once sounded confusing became familiar. Common phrases started repeating themselves. Without realizing it, I was learning real English instead of textbook English. One afternoon, I decided it was finally time to test myself. I walked into a small coffee shop near my school. Normally, I would simply point at the menu, but this time I promised myself I would speak. The young barista smiled warmly. "Hi, what can I get for you today?" For a second, my heart started beating faster. I almost lost my courage, but I remembered my promise. I smiled back. "I'd like a cappuccino, please." "Sure," she replied. "What size?" I understood the question immediately. "Medium, please," she continued. "Would you like regular milk or oat milk?" Only a few weeks earlier, I would have panicked. Now, I answered confidently, "Regular milk is fine." "Thank you." She prepared my coffee, handed it to me, and smiled. "Have a wonderful day." I looked her in the eyes and answered, "You too." That conversation lasted less than 1 minute, but to me, it felt like winning an Olympic gold medal. As I walked back outside holding my coffee, I couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't because I had ordered a drink, it was because, for the first time, I had completed a real conversation. In English without freezing. That tiny success changed something inside me. I realized confidence doesn't appear before action. Confidence appears after action. The more I spoke, the easier speaking became. Of course, I still made mistakes. Sometimes I used the wrong tense. Sometimes I pronounced words incorrectly. Sometimes people asked me to repeat myself, but something interesting happened. Nobody laughed. Nobody insulted me. Instead, people were patient. Most even encouraged me. One elderly man at a bookstore smiled after hearing my accent. He asked, "Are you learning English?" I nodded. He replied, "You're doing great. Keep speaking." Those 4 words stayed with me for weeks, because sometimes one person's encouragement can erase months of self-doubt. By the end of my 3rd month in Canada, my classmates noticed the difference. The girl who could barely introduce herself was now participating in classroom discussions. I wasn't perfect, not even close, but I was improving every single day, and that was enough to keep me moving forward. For the first time since arriving in Canada, I no longer felt like a tourist. Finally felt like I belonged. By the time I had spent 4 months in Canada, I had become much more comfortable speaking English. I still wasn't fluent. I still made mistakes, but I was no longer afraid of opening my mouth. That alone felt like a huge victory. However, improving my English was only one part of the journey. The other challenge was surviving financially. Canada was an amazing country, but it was also expensive. Every month, I carefully planned every dollar I spent. Rent took the biggest portion of my budget. Then came groceries, transportation, phone, bills, school fees. There wasn't much money left after paying for the essentials. Quickly realized that if I wanted to continue studying, I needed a part-time job. So I started applying everywhere. Restaurants, supermarkets, bookstores, coffee shops. For 2 weeks, I received rejection after rejection. Some employers wanted Canadian experience. Others needed someone with stronger English. Each rejection hurt my confidence. One evening, while walking home, I almost gave up. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe my English still wasn't good enough. But the next morning, I reminded myself why I had come to Canada. I wasn't there to quit. I was there to grow, so I kept applying. Finally, one small neighborhood cafe invited me for an interview. I was nervous, not because of the questions, because of the English. The manager welcomed me with a smile. She asked, "So, Sophia, why do you want to work here?" I took a deep breath. My English is still improving, I admitted honestly, but I'm a fast learner. I'm hardworking and I never give up, she smiled. I like your honesty. A few minutes later, she shook my hand. Welcome to the team. I could hardly believe it. It was my very first job in Canada. On my first day, everything happened so quickly. Customers kept arriving. Orders came one after another. Some spoke clearly. Others spoke so fast that I struggled to understand them. Whenever I didn't catch something, I politely asked, "Could you please repeat that?" At first, I felt embarrassed, but then I noticed something. People didn't mind repeating themselves. In fact, most customers appreciated that I wanted to understand correctly. Every work shift became another English lesson. I learned expressions that no textbook had ever taught me. Take your time, no worries, sounds. Good, here you go. Have a nice one. Little by little, these phrases became part of my daily vocabulary. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. A regular customer came in and started chatting with me while waiting for his coffee. Instead of giving short answers, I decided to continue the conversation. We talked about the weather, then sports, then travel. 5 minutes passed before I realized something incredible. I had just held my longest conversation in English without translating, without panicking, without freezing. When he left, he smiled and said, "Your English has improved a lot." Those words meant more to me than he could ever imagine. Around the same time, I also started making friends. At first, I spent most of my free time alone, but one of my classmates invited me to join an international student meetup. Almost said no, I was still shy, but I forced myself to go. That single decision changed everything. I met students from all over the world. Some were beginners, some spoke fluent English. Nobody judged anyone. We were all learning together. Every weekend, we explored different parts of Toronto. We visited parks, museums, libraries, local festivals. Every outing became another opportunity to practice English naturally. Sometimes we laughed at our mistakes. Sometimes we corrected each other. Instead of feeling embarrassed, we celebrated every improvement. One evening, while walking home after meeting friends, I noticed something strange. I saw a beautiful sunset. Without thinking, a sentence appeared in my mind. "The sky looks beautiful today." It wasn't in Portuguese. It was in English. I stopped walking. I smiled. That small moment felt magical. For months, I had translated every thought inside my head. Now, my brain was beginning to think directly in English. That was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. From then on, everything became easier. Listening became faster. Speaking became smoother. Reading felt more natural. Even writing no longer seemed impossible. Of course, I still had a long way to go. Fluency doesn't happen overnight. It happens through hundreds of small improvements that people rarely notice. Looking back, I realized something important. The biggest obstacle had never been grammar. It had never been vocabulary. It had been fear. The fear of making mistakes. The fear of sounding different. The fear of being judged. The day I stopped worrying about being perfect, my English finally started growing, and without realizing it, I was becoming a completely different person. Not just someone who spoke another language, but someone who believed that any dream was possible with enough courage and consistency. By the end of my first year in Canada, I wasn't the same person who had arrived at the airport feeling scared and confused. I had become stronger, more confident, more independent. Most importantly, I had finally started believing in myself, but my biggest goal was still waiting. Medical school. Getting accepted wasn't easy. Every university required strong academic records, excellent English skills, and a high IELTS score. When I first looked at the IELTS requirements, I felt nervous. The reading passages looked incredibly difficult. The writing task seemed impossible. The speaking test terrified me. I knew that passing this exam would decide my future. So once again, I created a plan. Every morning before work, I practiced reading academic articles. Every evening after class, I wrote essays and asked my teachers to correct them. I recorded myself answering speaking questions and listened to my pronunciation over and over again. Sometimes I hated hearing my own voice, but every recording showed me where I needed to improve. Week after week, my confidence continued to grow. There were days when I felt unstoppable. There were also days when nothing seemed to go right. Some practice tests ended with disappointing scores. Sometimes I forgot important vocabulary. Sometimes I couldn't finish the reading section on time. Whenever that happened, I reminded myself of something my father had always said. Progress is more important than perfection. Those words helped me stay focused. Finally, exam day arrived. I barely slept the night before. My mind was full of doubts. What if I fail? What if all this hard work isn't enough? When I entered the testing center, I looked around. Every candidate looked nervous. That made me realize I wasn't alone. Everyone there was fighting for a better future. The listening section began. I stayed calm. The reading passages were challenging, but I refused to panic. The writing section tested every skill I had practiced for months. Finally came the speaking interview. The examiner smiled politely. Instead of thinking about grammar, I focused on communicating naturally. The conversation flowed much better than I expected. When the test ended, I walked outside feeling completely exhausted. Now all I could do was wait. Those next few days felt longer than the entire exam itself. Every morning I checked my email. Nothing. Every afternoon I refreshed the results page. Still nothing. Then one evening, while sitting in my room after work, my phone vibrated. My results had arrived. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely open the page. I closed my eyes for a second. Then I looked. I had passed. Not only had I passed, I had achieved the score required for medical school. I couldn't believe it. Tears filled my eyes. I immediately called my parents. When my mother answered, I couldn't even speak. She knew something had happened. Between tears, I finally whispered, "Mom, I did it." For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. We simply cried together. My father came to the phone. His voice sounded emotional. "I always knew you could do it." That moment made every sacrifice worth it. A few months later, another email changed my life forever. My application had been accepted. I was officially admitted to a medical university in Canada. I read the letter again, and again, and again. It still didn't feel real. The little girl who once couldn't read a simple English paragraph was now studying medicine in another country. But getting accepted was only the beginning. Medical school was unlike anything I had experienced before. The textbooks were massive. The lectures were fast. Every class introduced dozens of new medical terms. Sometimes I spent hours reading a single chapter. There were nights when I studied until sunrise. Coffee became my closest companion. Stress became part of my daily routine. Some classmates seemed to understand everything immediately. Meanwhile, I often needed twice as much time. There were moments when I questioned myself again. Am I really smart enough for this? Whenever those thoughts appeared, I remembered my journey. I remembered the classroom where I couldn't introduce myself. I remembered my first conversation at the coffee shop. I remembered every rejection, every mistake, every small victory. If I had overcome all of those challenges, I could overcome this one too. Instead of complaining, I adapted. I recorded lectures and listened to them while traveling. I created flashcards for difficult medical vocabulary. I joined study groups where we explained complicated topics to each other in English. Teaching others helped me understand concepts even better. Little by little, difficult subjects became manageable. Exams that once frightened me became opportunities to prove how much I had grown. Semester after semester, my grades improved. Professors noticed my dedication. Classmates started asking me for help during revision sessions. That surprised me the most. Not long ago, I had been the student asking everyone else for help. Now, I was helping others. That was the moment I realized how far I had come. Success wasn't built in one day. It was built through thousands of small decisions. Every early morning, every late night study session, every difficult conversation, every mistake I refused to repeat. Step by step, the dream that once felt impossible was finally becoming reality. 4 years passed faster than I could have imagined. The sleepless nights, the endless assignments, the difficult exams, the moments of doubt, they had all become part of my journey. Then one unforgettable morning, I put on my graduation gown. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The girl who had once been afraid to say a single sentence in English was now graduating from medical school. When my name was announced, I slowly walked across the stage. The audience applauded. My professors smiled proudly. I accepted my diploma with both hands and held it close to my heart. At that moment, memories flashed through my mind. I remembered my small hometown in Brazil. I remembered my parents working long hours. I remembered my first embarrassing English class. I remembered crying alone in my tiny room in Canada. Every painful moment had led me to this day. As I looked into the audience, I saw my parents. My mother was wiping away tears. My father stood proudly with the biggest smile I had ever seen. After the ceremony, I hugged them tightly. Neither of us needed many words. Our tears said everything. A few weeks later, I received an offer from one of Toronto's leading hospitals. I had officially become a doctor. Walking into the hospital on my first day felt surreal. Everything was exactly as I had imagined years ago. Doctors moved quickly through the hallways. Nurses cared for patients with compassion. Families waited anxiously for good news. Now, I was one of the people responsible for giving them hope. During my first month, I learned more than I had ever expected. Medicine wasn't only about knowledge. It was about patience, kindness, communication, and trust. One afternoon, a little girl was admitted to the emergency department. She looked frightened. She held her mother's hand tightly and refused to let go. Her fear reminded me of my younger brother all those years ago. I knelt beside her and smiled gently. "It's okay," I said. "We're going to take good care of you." She slowly smiled back. After her treatment, her mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, doctor." Those 3 words touched my heart more deeply than any salary ever could. That evening, as I drove home, I realized something. Success isn't measured by how much money you earn. It's measured by the lives you impact. Of course, my career also gave me financial freedom. I moved into a beautiful apartment in downtown Toronto. I finally bought my dream car. For the first time, I no longer worried about paying rent or buying groceries. But the first thing I did with my salary wasn't shopping. I called my parents. A few weeks later, I paid off the remaining debts they had taken on to support my education. Then, I surprised them with plane tickets to Canada. When they arrived, I took them to my hospital. I showed them my office. My colleagues greeted them warmly. My father looked around quietly before saying, "I knew you would make it." My mother hugged me and whispered, "This was always your dream, and now it's your reality." That was one of the happiest days of my life. Sometimes people ask me, what was the secret to your success? Was it talent? No. Was it luck? Definitely not. The secret was consistency. I never stopped learning, even on the days when I felt tired, even on the days when I wanted to quit. I kept moving forward, one small step at a time. Looking back, I understand something that I wish someone had told me years ago. Learning English didn't simply change my language, it changed my identity. It changed the way I thought, the opportunities I could reach, the people I could meet, the confidence I carried inside myself. English became the bridge between my dreams and my reality. So, if you're watching this today and thinking, my English isn't good enough, I'm too old to learn, I don't have enough money, maybe I'll start next year. Let me stop you right there. Those are the same excuses I almost believed, and excuses never change. Lives action does. You don't have to become fluent in 1 month. You don't have to know every grammar rule. You simply have to start. Learn a few new words today. Read 1 page tomorrow. Watch 1 English video. Practice speaking for 5 minutes. Repeat that every day. 1 year from now, you'll be amazed by your progress. Remember this: every expert was once a beginner. Every confident speaker was once nervous. Every successful person once doubted themselves. The only difference is that they refused to quit. Maybe today you're sitting in a small room with a big dream. Maybe your family is making sacrifices for your future. Maybe everyone around you thinks your goal is impossible. Don't let their opinions become your limits. Believe in yourself before the world believes in you, because 1 decision, 1 habit, 1 language can completely transform your life. If my journey has taught you anything, I hope it's this: your background doesn't define your future. Your fears don't define your potential. Your current English level doesn't define what you can become. Your daily actions do. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. If this story inspired you, don't let the inspiration disappear after this video ends. Take action today. Start learning, keep improving, and never stop believing in yourself. Subscribe to English Gateway for more inspiring stories, practical English lessons, and powerful motivation to help you become the best version of yourself. Remember, your English journey starts with 1 lesson, but it can end with a completely different life. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and never stop chasing your dreams.